Today the recording is now just started, and we are getting to our first presenter, Casey Doherty, and her presentation on art is activism. And I want to say welcome and thank you for attending today's session. You can find a link to the stream text. Alex Peterson has been kind enough to put this up, and we will be getting started real soon. Thank you.
All right, folks, ready if I get started?
Yeah.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much for the introduction. I am so pleased to be our first presenter here at the summit. My name is Casey Doherty, and I'm a white woman with blonde hair wearing a black blazer and a black and white striped shirt. I'm honored to be here with all of you today and share my research. I'll be speaking about my paper, Reimagining Protest, Artivism in the Myalgic Encephalomyelitis Community, which was published in the Including Disability Journal in 2024. In this paper, I analyze publicly shared art projects by people with a disability called severe myalgic encephalomyelitis. Artivism is the intersection of art and activism. The literature on artivism argues that social change is the main goal. Many artivist expressions have a subversive character, critiquing the status quo and established institutions. My research explores how artivism can be used in the disability community to further our collective cause. This slide depicts a group of people calling for increased funding for long COVID and ME/CFS care. I'm in the middle wearing the jeans. I'd love to share what led me to this research. I've been disabled and chronically ill for many years, so I'm no stranger to pain and fatigue. However, after a COVID infection, I became bedbound and developed the disability known as myalgic encephalomyelitis, or ME, also known as chronic fatigue syndrome. I was angry, scared, and extremely sick. I didn't know how to channel some of my anger into activism because I couldn't get out of bed to do anything. It turns out I had developed ME. ME is a chronic multi-system disease characterized by post-exertional malaise, a worsening of symptoms following ordinary activity that may result in a permanent decrease in functioning. For me, it means that doing anything like showering, talking on the phone, or walking short distances is difficult. The best way I know to describe it is like a feeling of being poisoned or having the worst flu you can imagine and being in constant pain. I'll speak a little more about the specifics of the disability shortly. After months in bed, I eventually found other folks with ME. I learned that there were a myriad of ways to protest beyond marching in the streets, and that activists were leaning into accessible methods of protest. I wanted to learn more. When conducting my literature review, I found that there was little to no research conducted on activism techniques by people with energy-limiting disabilities, especially ME, and no research I could find that was conducted on the topic by people with the disability. There is, however, a well-documented history of marginalization and negative stereotyping of people with ME from scientific, clinical, and social communities, in addition to outright denial that the disability even exists. Most ME patients have to fight to be listened to and diagnosed. Even when diagnosed, there's no cure or approved treatment. More and more people are suddenly getting sick and never recovering. They're pushed from daily life. The slogan of ME activist organizations is "Millions Missing," describing how millions of people are missing from research, funding, policy, work, school, and their lives. ME boasts a very long symptom list. I have all of the symptoms listed on the screen and more. The effects of ME are devastating enough to leave 25% of patients housebound or bedbound, and an estimated 75% unable to work full-time. ME affects 15 to 30 million people worldwide, which is likely a vast undercount. It's difficult to accurately assess how many people have ME because diagnosis is rare, And people with ME are described as faking it, stressed, or lazy. What we're really experiencing is a neurological disease that causes severe pain and fatigue, cognitive decline, all of the symptoms on the slide, and more. Studies have found the rates of ME to be substantially higher in women than in men. People of color are much less likely to be diagnosed with ME, but not less likely to have the disability. Additionally, people with lower family incomes are more likely to have ME, as are people living in rural areas. These disparities make ME a microcosm of broader marginalization in healthcare and represents a major intersectional crisis. People with ME have been ignored, maligned, and disbelieved for decades, while also being excluded from traditional forms of disability activism. We have to use our limited energy so very carefully. Marching in the streets holding a sign just isn't accessible for most of us. Therefore, ME activists have gotten creative, some turning to art as protest. This slide depicts two photos. The first photo shows the Washington Monument in the background against a blue sky. In the foreground are many rows of cots with red blankets. The second photo is a photo of a cot with a pillowcase decorated by my friend Emily Frazier. Emily created a pillowcase with the words "Still Sick, Still Fighting" in black text and an embroidered human heart and raised fist. I captured these photos at a Millions Missing protest in May 2023. The art installation was inspired by the 1987 AIDS memorial quilt at the same location in front of the Washington Monument. It was a powerful example of artivism. Activists with ME and long COVID sent in pillowcases decorated by themselves or by caregivers or allies. The pillowcases shared messages about personal experiences, policy, and the politics of having a disability like ME. The pillowcases were placed on hundreds of cots in front of the Washington Monument, symbolizing the millions of people who are now disabled by ME or long COVID in the United States. So when I decided to research artivism among people with ME after attending events like the Millions Missing protest and online actions, I turned to a group I organize with called ME Action. Their logo is displayed on this slide. Each summer, they release a severe ME artist project gallery. I analyzed a random sample of the submissions to the 2023 gallery. Each artist has had severe ME for a different amount of time, ranging from 5 months to 43 years. When analyzing the art, I coded content, medium, and themes. I will share the themes I identified next. I identified 5 main themes from the sample of artivism pieces. The artwork illuminates the challenges the artists face while existing in a world in which many people don't even believe their disability exists. The first theme is lack of freedom. This topic appeared most frequently. As people with severe ME, most, if not all, of the artists are bedbound or housebound. Some of the artwork mentioned or depicted a window separating the artist from the world outside. Other artists described how they feel stuck in their homes or beds and compared them to prisons or cages. One artist wrote, "I don't want a cage. I want to roam free, even if it's harder and easier to get hurt. I'll take the hurt. Let me out of the cage, or let me forget that my walls have anything else on the other side." In this vein, many artists shared that knowing life was going on beyond their beds and homes made dealing with severe ME more difficult. A subtopic within Theme 1 is solace in nature. Many artists use depictions of access to nature to convey a dream of freedom and explain that freedom is the ability to be out in nature. The second theme is the anthropomorphism of ME. For some of these artists, ME appears as an ever-present character in their lives, dictating what they can and cannot do. ME takes on human characteristics of being mean, limiting, or evil. Some of the art is directed at ME as a character, sharing how it has affected the artist's life. The third theme is invisibility. ME can make people feel invisible and forgotten by society. Some of the artists mention the Millions Missing slogan of ME activist organizations. One artist wrote, "I am one of the millions missing, and I'm still fighting, not this illness, however unwelcome, now a part of me. but the arrogance of ableism that lets a virus breathe freer than us, that keeps us from being found. Some of the art describes how even those closest to the artists move on after an ME diagnosis. One artist wrote, "It's like finding out what happens when you die. After the initial flurry of concern, people move on with their lives." The fourth theme is anger. Lots of the art included explicit language and used capital letters, like the artist was shouting their message. One artist wrote, "We're not going to let you forget us. No." Another artist shared small uprisings, insistent, stubborn showdowns with myself, with the world, with myself. The fifth theme is fear. Fear often appeared in the non-written pieces, particularly in paintings and collages. Artists shared images of faces with fear clearly expressed. Some artists showed how confusion can cause fear, using images that are blurry and dark. One artist shared that ME has revealed my darkest fears. Artists explain that developing ME caused a complete upheaval of their life, making them fear new experiences, new symptoms, and the potential of worsening their condition. Artivism is a powerful way to communicate a message. Using strong language, striking artwork, and common terms may draw attention to the challenges people with ME face and allow their audience to better understand. Art allows people to create from their homes or beds and share their work widely. This speaks to the versatility and efficacy of artivism in the disability justice movement. This slide depicts a sample of art that I analyzed from the gallery. I will read it now. It's a poem titled "Sick." Remember Monday, 100% attendance. Remember knowing I'd done too much and how long it takes to recover. Remember wanting to belong. Remember trying. Remember failing. Remember 11 years. The glass eyes, the bewildered look, the turning away. Remember how hard it is to say, I can't. Remember the judgment. Remember the shame. Remember becoming a stranger. Remember it again. Remember the hobbit house I never leave. My animal hide. Remember the life I share it with, nestled into the landscape as if she and I had taken root. Remember who I am, the thinker, the listener, the lover of life, the poet. This I must remember. As I move on to my next slide, I want to hold space for the artists with ME who begin to create, but crash and may be unable to finish their artwork. They are still fighting and creating. This slide depicts me in front of the White House in Washington, D.C., holding a sign shaped like a tombstone that reads, "MECFS neglect kills us." My analysis provides a starting point to investigate and share the experiences of people with severe ME. As the number of people with ME increases globally due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, it is of the utmost importance to continue this research. Several studies estimate that half of patients with long COVID fulfill ME criteria. It's also critical that this research is conducted and led by disabled people, particularly people with lived experience of ME. My research indicates that the sample of artists with severe ME feel unheard and ignored by society, the medical community, the government, and even by others in the disability activism community. This research population represents major potential for scholars to center missing voices from disability studies scholarship. I want to share there is a way for you to get involved in ME activism if you're interested, and it's coming up. ME Action is holding a Millions Missing protest on this May 12th. It's a Monday. The protest is to send out an SOS to Congress to save our support systems, save our science, save our society. There will be a protest in Washington, D.C. in front of the Capitol building, local protests across the country, an online protest, and an art initiative. I hope you'll consider getting involved to learn more about ME activism. I want to thank you all for engaging with my research today. I hope this project can create new opportunities for conversation and collaboration to further ME activism and disability justice. I'm grateful to my community and their artistic and activist contributions. Please reach out to me for sources, questions, and to continue the conversation. I hope we can work to reimagine protest together. Thank you for your time.
morning, and thank you, Casey, for this wonderful presentation that you have done today. I wanted to go through and have a couple questions for you today. Of the 5 things that you identified, the lack of freedom, anthropomorphism, of ME, invisibility, anger, and fear, which do you think is probably the most prevalent that you see across the board?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I'll say too, I spoke at the beginning about my personal connection to this community. I have mild to moderate ME, so I can't ever claim to understand the experiences of folks with severe ME at this time. However, in studying this sample of artivism, I would say the first theme that I identified, lack of freedom, was the most prevalent. I think that really did appear across all mediums of art, which was really interesting. Because like I said, something like the theme I identified, fear, was more common in like non-written pieces, but the lack of freedom piece showed up a lot. I think I mentioned how in maybe like collages and paintings, I would often see things like barred windows or closed windows. Sometimes people would do collages of photos they had taken from their beds, showing how there's like that physical distance between themselves and the outside, indicating that lack of freedom. So I would say that that first one was the most prevalent across all mediums.
And how do you, because you did mention that you have a event coming up soon for activism, how do you envision like our policymakers, especially in our current environment, incorporating these insights from Artivision into a more inclusive activism, and then also overall in healthcare practices?
Yeah, so I'll take that in 2 parts. So, from the policymaker's perspective, and this is an area that interests me a lot. In my day job, I'm a disability policy analyst, so I think a lot about how to um, increase the awareness of policymakers and encourage them to seek out folks most impacted in their policymaking, because of course we know politics and policy is personal, and I think some elected officials don't look at it that way. So I think artivism is an excellent way for folks, activists, to get in front of policymakers. And maybe like writing a letter or calling their elected official isn't accessible to them, but maybe over time working on a collage or a poem is. And so I think that's why it's so important to expand our definition of what activism is, because I think some people, think first and foremost it's getting out and marching in the streets, which is just not accessible to someone like me. But then going even further, I think folks may say, well, it's calling your elected official, and that's not accessible to many people as well. So I think when I consider how policymakers can use artivism, if we are expanding our definition of protest, I mean, one great way I described coming up on May 12th, there's going to be a protest, and I shared that the theme is SOS, like save our support system, save our science. So there's going to be a lot of art around that theme, and that's going to be shared in local protests and specifically outside of the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. So we're asking members of Congress to come out and join us, and it becomes a spectacle. And I mentioned in the beginning of my presentation, a lot of this work takes inspiration from the 1987 AIDS memorial quilt that some of you may be familiar with. And that, I mean, that was such a powerful homage to people that we lost due to HIV and AIDS. And it really, it sparked action. It sparked awareness across the country. It got elected officials aware and some interested. And so that's sort of the inspiration that we're taking here. And I will say, sorry, this is a long-winded answer. We have seen some wins on the policy front in this space. And so I think that's very encouraging, particularly in an environment where we're seeing mostly losses for disabled folks. So I'll just share quickly, like activists in this space have drawn the attention of policymakers like Senator Bernie Sanders, who introduced the Long COVID Moonshot Act last year. The current political landscape means research and support systems are being slashed. So organizations like ME Action are working more broadly to protect things like access to Medicaid, which many people with ME rely on. And so I remember at the Millions Missing protest in front of the Washington Monument in 2023 that I shared photos of, I was approached by people asking questions about the art installation. And many of them, those of us in DC, know that there's lots of tourists here. So many were tourists coming up and saying, I don't know anything about this. Like, can you please tell me more? And even convincing one person to walk away and mask more often to protect people from deadly pathogens, that is a win. And so we've also seen like ME Awareness Day proclamations in cities and states. And I'll share one last win in the policy space to show, I think, the impact of this work. Minnesota has been a state that has been an ally to folks with ME and long COVID. So the long COVID program of the Minnesota Department of Health awarded the organization ME Action a 3-year grant to address the impacts of long COVID and ME. And so the project will focus on connecting folks from Minnesota with these disabilities to home and community-based services. So all of this work in the policy space is making an impact. So that is very exciting for me to see. Sorry for that long-winded answer. And then just quickly in the healthcare space, a big part of people with ME accessing healthcare is just getting their providers to believe them in the first place. In my experience with mild to moderate ME, I have other chronic illnesses as well that present similarly. I have a lot of privilege in a healthcare space. As a white person, I get, you're tired, you're working too much, you aren't getting enough sleep, it's related to your menstrual cycle, any number of things that, like, yeah, sure, are true, but are not causing my disability. So the act of storytelling through Artivism, I think, is a extremely powerful aspect. And people who, have participated in these art installations have also done outreach to healthcare providers. So taking the messaging that we're getting from these art projects and putting them into kind of the medical realm, educating providers around what we can and cannot do. For instance, going in person to medical appointments often is impossible for many people. And so a lot of the outreach has focused specifically on the healthcare community. And sorry for that long-winded answer. Happy to follow up with anyone who has any other questions or ideas.
No problem, Casey. I do have a question here from Paloma. She says, thanks, Casey. That was really informative. And she loved the expansive approach to activism. Now, are Artivism artists that are giving you lots of joy right now? Have any other examples besides the one that you showed in the
Yeah, thanks, Paloma. That's a great question. I think, oh gosh. I'll give a shout out to my friend Emily Frazier, who I shouted out in the pillowcase photo. And you can find her on Bluesky. She often shares a lot of interesting writing and she'll do some embroidery. She has severe ME. She's an artivist that I admire very much. And I want to say too, like a lot of I'll put the link to my paper and including disability in the chat, but a lot of my framework for this work was inspired by Frida Kahlo's work. If you're not familiar with her, much of her like very famous art was inspired and informed by her disabilities and tragic accident as a young person. So I think there are so many historical connections. Oh, thank you, Steph. Stephanie just put my link in the chat. There's so many historical connections to Artivism. So this is not a new term. Maybe it's fairly newly named that, but it has been around forever. So I've been inspired for a long time by people past and present.
Okay. And I do want to thank you again. This was a wonderful presentation. We're coming to the end of our time right now. If you have any other questions, you can go through and read Casey at her email that she did put in her presentation. You can can also find a link to the presentation. One second, let me pull that up real fast so I can share that with everyone. Okay. Usually I'm a little bit more organized. So here's a link to all of the information from earlier. No, it's not. Second. So just excuse me for a moment when I go and put these. So. So here is a link to the main page, right here, for, actually that's the agenda, and I'm not sure why that decided to go through and show that one. When I link something else. Okay. And I thank you again, Casey. We'll be taking a short break before we get into our next presentation, but I will have that link up in just a moment.
Thank you, everyone.